Here we're on our second installment of inflation, and we're going to take a look at the math here, and hopefully that'll help sink in some of this concept here. Inflation is, of course, the general rise in prices. So what that means is it takes more dollars to buy the same amount of goods. Okay? Your dollars are losing something called purchasing power. So if it takes $3 to go buy lunch, a burger, fries, and a Coke, and then they raise the prices a little bit, now it takes $4. See, it takes more dollars to buy the burger, fries, and the Coke. It used to be $3 for that, but now it's $4. You remember the $5 footlong Subway sandwich, and then it became the $6 footlong. It took more dollars to buy the same amount of sandwich. The sandwich didn't get bigger. Sandwich stayed the same. You just had to pay more money to buy it. Okay? So that's what I mean by loss of purchasing power. It takes more dollars to buy the same amount of goods. And that's what inflation does. That's why it's so insidious. It just creeps up on you, as it says in the book there. All right? So take a look here. If we have an inflation rate of 2%, then what that means is we are losing 2% of our purchasing power per year. Now you say to yourself, oh, okay, so next year it'll cost $102 to buy the same basket of goods that I bought this year for $100. Yes, that's right. And you say, oh, that's not so bad. I mean, $2, so what? Big deal. And I would ask you, what is it the next year after that? And you'd say, well, $104 because it's 2% inflation. No. The percent is of the 102. It's 2% of 102, not 2% of 100 each time. So it's really $104.30. And the next year you say, well, it would be $106. No. It takes $107 the next year to buy the same basket of goods. And you say, well, what's going on here? I say, well, that's how percentages works. Because it's a percentage of the year before it, not a percentage that's the same of the base year every time. So what happens is that 2% of 2% of 2%, it accelerates the loss of your purchasing power over time. And in fact, this is proven because we can see the dollar in the past 100 years. In the last 100 years at 2% inflation, you would lose 96% of your purchasing power. Okay? That's a lot. So the power of percentages is something that human beings have a very hard time grasping. They always think these things are straight lines, when in fact they're actually curves. So this one is accelerating downward as it goes there. Okay? I can't remember the famous person who said that, but humans' greatest failing is inability to understand the exponential function. Okay? This is why people go into the credit card debt and they think it's not so bad, and then suddenly it just takes off on them. So there it is. So we're looking at things in percentage terms, and you need to take that into account. All right. So if our inflation rate is 2%, what you want to do is you want to think of inflation as negative growth. You want to think of it as negative growth because it's robbing your purchasing power every year. It's taking it away. So if you were to take $1,000 and bury it in your backyard or put it under your mattress or something like that, then you are absorbing the full inflation rate. That inflation of 2% has come fully out of your $1,000 and you lost 2% of your purchasing power by putting it under the mattress. You think, well, I saved money. Well, that's the problem. If money was actually stable, that would make sense. You'd want to save it. But see, here's the first key to unlocking the puzzle of getting rich these days. You actually don't want to save money. I know. That's why I hate inflation, because you should save money, but the problem is the rules of the game don't encourage you to do that. There's no incentive to do that. Okay? So if you put it under your mattress, you're just absorbing the full negative 2%. If you invest in some stocks and they make 8%, but you have inflation rate of 2%, then your real terms are 6%. See, everyone loves to quote, well, my stocks made 8% this year. Did they? They made 8% in nominal terms, but they only made 6% in real terms. Because if you account for inflation, that's what you got. Okay? So what about your bonds? They were at 4%, but no, you've got to account for inflation. And so what you really made was not 4%, you made 2% on your bonds because you've got to get it into real terms. How about your savings account? Well, there's something interesting. You didn't experience the -2 of someone who buried it under their, backyard or put it under the mattress, but leaving it in your savings account at 1%, if inflation is higher than that 1%, you actually lost money in real terms. You saved it in the bank and you lost money. Okay, I hope this is starting to sink in. And remember those shadow stats I was talking about where the CPI at the government says is like 2 to 4%, but shadow stats says it's like 10 to 12, 15% if you calculate it in the old way that where they used to do it. You could go broke investing in all of these if shadow stats is correct. You'll actually be poorer. All right? So what's a person to do? That's a good question. And we'll get there, but we got to lay some more foundation here. Okay? So what about salary? I hear people say this all the time. Hey, I just got a raise of like 2%. Okay. You see the catch? Is it in nominal terms or is it in real terms? Because I say, big deal. And they're like, no, I got a 2% raise. Why aren't you excited? I'm like, because it's not a raise. They're like, huh? I got 2% more on my paycheck. Look, the numbers went up. 2%. I'm wealthier. And I just shake my head. Okay? Because if your raise is 2% and the inflation rate is 2%, then your real raise was 0. You gained some purchasing power with your raise and you lost the same amount due to inflation. You're no better off than where you were before. Okay? So a lot of people will say, hey, let's raise minimum wage. Okay. We raise minimum wage, and then what happens to all the prices, like we just learned in our last video? Prices go up because now everyone's got to pay everyone else more, so the business has to raise its prices. So did we gain anything? No. So everyone screams and yells, we need help. We need minimum wage increase. Okay, so it goes up. And what happens to the prices? Prices go up. You're no better off. So we do this and do this and do this and do this. And to the point where people somehow are running on this treadmill of if we just raise minimum wage more, it'll just make everything better. And maybe it's because they're desperate to do something. I don't know. But they don't seem to figure out that it really doesn't matter. So I'm sure our governments are going to raise minimum wages again. It's a great way to get elected if people keep thinking that somehow that's how you can actually help the economy. But the politician will say, elect me and I'll raise it. And they raise it. And then the prices come up and they're like, it's no better. And elect me and I'll raise it. Elect me and I'll raise it. And they just keep... It's amazing how long that circus can go. But okay. All right. So what we really need to take a look at here is this inflation rate going up is always eroding your purchasing power. So here's the thing. If you don't get a raise of 2% per year, then you will be losing money. Your salary in nominal terms will look bigger and bigger, but your purchasing power will actually be going down. You'll actually be making less money per year. I have negotiated contracts before with businesses, with the school district, with all kinds of organizations, nonprofits, and I've tried to explain this, and people are just like, no, I'm not giving you a raise. I'm like, well, then I'm losing 2% if you don't raise my salary the same amount as the inflation rate. You're basically cutting my pay. And they're like, no, I'm keeping your pay the same. Like, no. Okay. And so they can't understand why pretty soon their salary schedule is so much lower than everyone else's and no one wants to work for them. Because the person running that show doesn't understand inflation. That's the issue. So if we have inflation, it pushes people to change their behavior. It creates different incentives. People are always wanting that raise because they have to keep their purchasing power. Do you see why inflation is such an insidious thing? It forces your society to do things in order to beat inflation. It basically punishes you for saving and encourages you to take very risky gambles with your money because you're sure to lose it here. If I put it in my savings account and park it there, I'm losing purchasing power every year. Little by little, it's just leaking away. So it forces me into something that's very risky because here's a sure loss and here's a potential gain. And so why is everyone piling into stocks these days? Well, because inflation is driving them to. It's the incentive. They have to do it if they want to stay ahead. Okay? So this is some of the math that goes into inflation. And we'll talk about that in class. And then in our third video on inflation, I'll show you some things about how you need to invest.